Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to start a new series, and I really have trouble believing that it's taken me this long to even think about this series, but here we are. What I want to talk about is mental health issues in fiction. Both a little bit on how it affects you as the writer, but also a lot with the how it can be a part of the story and how it can work out. Today is just going to be like the introduction. I'm just going to do a high level overview of all of this, and then I'm going to go into various mental health issues specifically to talk about those. And the reason why I kind of wanted to do this is I find that I often talk with clients who I am surprised that they are surprised to learn that they have anxiety or depression, or that this is disordered eating, or what constitutes substance abuse and what doesn't constitute, that sort of thing. And these issues are very, very common. I forget what the percentages are. I probably should look that up before I press record. But a large percentage, not most, but a large percentage of the American population, at least, has some sort of mental health issue. And so if you're writing in modern day, or I'd even argue in science fiction, fantasy, maybe to some degree even historical, these factors can take play, and it's good for you as the writer to know more about this. And let's be honest, a lot of writers have mental health issues of their own. I've been dealing with depression since I was a kid. Substance abuse, very common. Hello, Ernest Hemingway. Anxiety, lots of anxiety, and I've sort of touched on these things, but you knowing how these mental health issues affect you, also affect your writing, can help you kind of move past them. Also, just because you have depression doesn't mean that your depression looks like everybody else's depression. And I think that's usually what surprises my clients, is they have an image in their head of what depression looks like, what alcoholism looks like, or whatever. And so when I explain to them, no, what you're doing is also this thing over here, it's more complicated, then they're actually genuinely surprised. So even if you are have a client, have a character that has anxiety, their anxiety may not look like your anxiety, and it may take on a different form. And understanding all these different ways that mental illnesses can take place can help you write characters that are much more in depth, much more realistic, and will probably reach your readers a little better, because some of your readers will be able to identify with what they're reading. They'll see a bit of themselves or something. Even if you don't necessarily put it front and forward, like in Saga the Scout. For those of you that have read it, or those of you who hadn't, it's a really good book. But one of the characters in there, Emily, which is sort of like the antagonist, has a disordered eating. She has an eating disorder, and has yet to come up in the book. It'll probably come up maybe later on, or at least be mentioned. It's not the issue that I want to put front and center about that character. This isn't that kind of a book. It's not that kind of story. But it gives me, the writer, kind of a good background on like where she's coming from and why she does some of the things that she does, and some of those motivations in this kind of a science fantasy post-apocalyptic world sort of thing. So it comes through that lens, as you will. So not saying that everybody with an eating disorder is going to turn into a knife wielding maniac, but Emily did. So, but yeah, so just kind of going to take a look at that high level thing. I believe what I'm also going to do is set up a Patreon channel subscription. I forget what it is. And what that will do is I'm going to try and find a way that if you wanted to, you could hire me just for like in consulting, almost like a writing coach. But really in this case, it's for much more of a specific sort of thing, talking about characters and their mental illnesses, and how you can add some depth, how you make them a little more realistic, how that can change their motivation, that sort of thing. But my first bit on using mental illness in a fiction format, my first bit of advice is to be very deliberate Why are you doing that? Why does it work out that way? When I decided that Emily had an eating disorder, that one didn't come in initially. I just wrote the character as she was coming to me, but over time, it kind of occurred to me, oh wait, competitive gymnast, angry all the time, distant father, alcoholic mother. Yeah, she's set up for an eating disorder. And once I said, okay, she's got that going on, then that kind of helped me, in the back of my head, it gave a different flavor to her relationship with Ethan, which is the protagonist, and to her parents and all this other stuff. And so it became a much more deliberate act. But just to say a character has anxiety, just to make them anxious, it's a little superficial. Now, you can do that for fun. Certainly, a lot of children's stories, they'll have like a very nervous kind of character who just kind of acts goofy because they're strange. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you feel like you're just checking off boxes, like, oh, this character needs to be depressed, this one needs to have an eating disorder, this one, whatever, that's probably the wrong way to do it. Because for a lot of people, the mental illness impacts a big chunk of their life. That's really the reason why we call it a mental illness. Is it is something that has a significant negative impact on their life, or some aspects of their life, if nothing else. People have trouble going to school. They have trouble having relationships. They have trouble being motivated. They have trouble just sleeping. They start engaging in coping mechanisms, which are usually not very healthy, to help them, to deal with their mental illness. That's why drugs and alcohol comes in. That's another thing. If you're going to have a character that has some sort of substance abuse issue, you kind of need to think about, like, why did they go there? Why are they an alcoholic? Nobody ever picked up a bottle of vodka and said, hey, I think I'll just be a fucking drunk, and they just start drinking. It's doing something for them. It's helping them to alleviate their anxiety. It's helping them to suppress their negative, thoughts about themselves, or that hypercritical voice in their head. It makes the voices go away. Some people with psychosis, abuse substances. It helps them feel like they fit in, or whatever. There's a long list of reasons as to why people even start drinking or doing drugs, and then why do they continue? Why do they maintain? That sort of thing. So it shouldn't just be something that you just sort of stick onto a character sheet because it's some sort of character profile thing or whatever. You kind of need to be very deliberate. Like, why am I going to make this character depressed? And what sort of form does their depression take? And then how do they cope with that depression? And how does that spill over into the rest of the world? How would the rest of the world see that? Are they, in some ways, Ethan, he's not quite depressed. He's more of a people pleaser because he was raised by an alcoholic with poor boundaries. But that drove so much. That's why Ethan feels like he needs to go out and save everybody. That's, in a way, that is how he becomes the hero, is he's trying to compensate for something in his past. You see how this works out? Mom is an alcoholic. Didn't really get into why she was an alcoholic because she's just sort of the background character. But that had an impact on her relationship with Ethan's dad, Ethan's sister, and then Ethan himself. And then that became the motivation for why Ethan was doing a lot of the things that he's doing. Just that one character choice had this sort of spillover effect, as opposed to just making her a drunk because, I don't like mothers and I just want to see a drunk mother, something like that. And so it's the same thing with depression, same thing with anxiety, eating disorders carry on this whole sort of thing. Psychosis is a little different. I'll talk a little bit about that one. I'll probably do a video on psychosis and delusions. Because for the most part, those are something that kind of happens to the person. We're still not 100% sure what schizophrenia is. And I believe, this is just kind of my belief of some of the stuff I've read, that schizophrenia is probably the symptom of something else that is coming out. and what that something else may be various different things. It's sort of like anger, which is another one I'll talk about. Anger is often depression or anxiety manifesting as anger. So when someone says they're angry, I'm immediately listening for what are they depressed or anxious about, because that's probably more what's going on. And I think psychosis can be like that too. Also, psychosis can be mimicked by a lot of drugs and alcohol. And I'm not talking about like just psychedelics. I mean, if you do enough meth, you'll stay awake. You'll be completely paranoid, and you'll see often horrible, nightmarish hallucinations as well. But so psychosis is a little different. But again, it will still have an impact on the whole character. And you know, we've been using mental health issues, particularly psychosis, in thriller fiction for over a century now, maybe even longer. The insane madman who runs around and kills people, that's a trope that's been around for quite some time. And there's nothing wrong with that, because it unfortunately is true. It does happen. But it's been so done to death that I think the old Victorian style of just sort of saying, oh, well, he's crazy, and that's why he does crazy shit. That one's kind of over. Most people, I think, are a little more savvy about mental health issues, and so if you say someone is crazy, they kind of want to know, like, well, what sort of crazy are we talking about, and you know, that sort of thing. Especially if you're going to make them like the evil villain, because the vast majority of people with mental illnesses are of no threat to anybody except themselves, usually, and sometimes even that's accidental. So then you have to get into the realm of like, okay, he's crazy, but he also wants to kill people. So how does his version of crazy make him want to kill people, and how does that play out, and that sort of thing. So that's probably my first big thing to tell you about using mental illness in writing your fiction, is just be very deliberate about it. Know why you're doing it. Know how it impacts the character, how it impacts their thoughts and their feelings first, and then that will impact how they act, and then that will impact how other people act around them, and that sort of thing. Because that's how you're going to show, instead of just tell your readers that this person has depression, is you're not going to just say, oh, he's sad all the time. You're going to show, he just stops doing the things he likes doing. He always has a negative outlook. No matter what is happening around him, he has some sort of negative view of it, or of himself or something. Or he's desperately trying to overcome his insecurities, so he's constantly, trying to help others and put other people in front of him. And it's not because he just has a natural altruistic view on the world. It's because he kind of wants something, and so becomes very transactional. People with depression can seem narcissistic and self-focused, and I'll talk more about how that manifests and why. But so they may not be a narcissistic jerk. They may really have just a very low they may be so focused on how they can fix whatever's broken within them that they just kind of stop noticing what's going on around them. That sort of thing. And then how do they cope with these sort of thoughts and feelings? And that will kind of also spill over. So, like I said, just kind of think more about this. I'm going to do videos on a variety of the topics. Certainly going to do depression, anxiety, because they're just so common. I will do one on substance abuse, because that's also very common. I'll probably do one on eating disorders, just because I have a lot of experience with those. That's kind of the groups that I have the most experience with, and therefore the most expertise with. I'll talk about how they affect men and women differently, because that's a thing. I'll probably talk about psychosis and delusion, just because people find that interesting. But what I'd like for you to do in the comments is to list any other mental illnesses or mental issues, problems, however you want to call it. Put that in the comments, so it can kind of give me ideas. This is one, I could probably build a whole channel just around this one topic, but I'm not going to. But I definitely need your help on coming up with what ideas are out there. And then I guess let me know if you'd be interested in this sort of consulting kind of services. I don't know how much it would be, or for what it would look like. Probably just do it online, because people Need probably do like a Zoom call or something. And I don't think it would need to be much time, really. I guess it kind of depends on how much time you want. But anyway, yeah, let me know if that's something that interests you as well, and I'll try and get that set up. But anyway, I will talk to y'all later. Bye.